from Indy, and today I'm going to be talking to you about the fun topic of requesting reviews and communicating with your guests after the tour. So we're going to go into some step-by-step hows, so how to start doing this during the tour and the actual steps to follow up and request those reviews and keep that communication after the tour. But first of all, I want to go into the real reason why we're here today, and why you've taken the time to watch this. And those are some other questions that we can answer by doing the tasks of asking for reviews and communicating with our guests. So the more important outcomes that we're going to get out of this is to help create trust and loyalty with your audience. And importantly, is a way to do this without spending extra time on marketing and extra money on marketing. So we're also going to answer the question of how can you design tour content that your guests are actually asking for versus what you think they want to see. We're also answering questions on how you can beat the competition, again, without sacrificing on margins and pricing all of the time. And another thing which we're always wondering is how do we create content for social media? That's always something that as a tour host or tour operator we're thinking about. So we're also going to cover how these tasks can help with creating that content. So first of all, let's look at why reviews are important. So I've got a little graphic here from TripAdvisor. We all know TripAdvisor, and that guests really go on here to choose and compare tours. So this graphic is actually a really great example to show you what are the factors that guests use when choosing tours. And as you can see, recommendations and reviews actually rate above price. And often we think when we want to compete with the competition that we always have to be cutting on price and cutting on margins to do this. And this actually shows that isn't necessarily the number one factor that guests are going to use when choosing tours, and that it's really important to have great reviews. So first of all, asking for reviews. The first part of that is actually planting the seed with your guests while they're on tour. And a lot of times, I know a lot of us think it can be cringy asking for reviews, and you feel like you're asking something from your guests and you don't want to do that. But actually, a happy guest who has had a great time is really wanting to do something for you, and they're wanting to do something for the tour guide. So by asking them to leave you a great review, you're actually helping them out by telling them how they can help you. So something else that's really important here is also explain to your guests why it's important. So if you are a business who is new and you're trying to get up above the competition and you're trying to work on those reviews for that reason, tell your guests why. If you are a host with a large tour operator and you're incentivized on getting reviews, tell that to your guests. So give them the reason why this is really important to you, and I promise you they will be more than happy to help you out and leave those reviews. Then another little sneaky tip here when asking for reviews is to set the intention to get 5-star reviews. So even if your guest has had a fantastic time, they might go and put a 4 or a 4.5 star because they still think that's a good rating. So just set that little intention in their mind, and when you're asking them for reviews, say, hey, you'll get an email after this tour asking for your 5-star review. Please go ahead and do that. It's really important to me. So use that phrase 5-star review, and it will plant that little seed in your guest's mind to do just that. Then the other thing that you can do in your tour is offer resources that you're going to share with your guests after the time. So for example, you might want to put together a list of restaurants. You might have a self-guided tour that you can offer your guests that goes into a certain portion of the city that you don't visit during your actual guided tour. So by offering these resources to your guests, you're giving them a reason to expect communication from you after the tour, and to go and look for that email or that message. And then within that message, you can include the ask for the review. So for example, when you're sitting at lunch and guests are bringing up where else they can eat in the city, great time to tell them you've got a guide of restaurants in the city. You'd love to email that through to them. Who would like to receive that? So then we've set the intention with our guests during the tour. We've talked to them about reviews and why they're important for us. But now the really important part is the follow-up, to actually go and ask for the reviews. So there are 2 times that we can do this. The first one that you want to do is directly after the tour, when the experience is really fresh in your guest's mind, and they're raving about what a happy time they've had. So that's the first time you want to ask for it. But you also can ask again once your guests are home. You'll find sometimes guests have a really busy, jam-packed travel itinerary and they just don't have time to go ahead and leave that review. They might also be detoxing from social media and emails while they're traveling. So in that case, having another reminder once they're home is really important, to get those guests who haven't left you the review from your first prompt directly after the tour. And then we obviously want to use templates for requesting reviews, because that will make it easier and less time consuming for you to ask for reviews, which means that you're able to ask everybody for them. But even when you're using a template, it's very easy to still personalize it. So make sure that you personalize it with people's names, and also make sure that you personalize place names. For example, when we were sitting having lunch at XYZ restaurant, you mentioned that you wanted other recommendations for restaurants in the areas. So just by mentioning that restaurant name and the time that you were sitting there, you're making it feel very personalized to them. But actually, this might be a conversation that you have with multiple guests, and a conversation that you always bring up while at lunch, but you're still making that feel very personalized for your guest. Then the other important thing to remember when sending these requests or these follow-ups is it doesn't necessarily just have to be email. You can also request it via WhatsApp or social media. It's quite important to use the platform that you've already been communicating with your guest on. So if their initial inquiry came through social media or WhatsApp, and that's how you've been planning and confirming the tour, and that's where you sent them the tour confirmation, then don't suddenly go and send them email, because they might not be looking for that communication from you. So try and keep it uniform, that however you have already been chatting to your guests, you carry on doing it that way. And again, you can still use templates for WhatsApp or social media messages. You can have them saved on a doc on your computer, and you just copy and paste them into those messages every time. Then again, we talked about having something to share. So that was your self-guided tour or your restaurant guide. Another nice thing that you can share to your guests when you're requesting the review once they're home is share a recipe for a meal or a cocktail that's local to the area. So it's a nice reason to be emailing them. Hi, you're home now. While you're missing Spain, you might love this recipe for a paella. So that's another reason to be messaging your guest. But the important thing is to make sure that you're asking for your review first. So in your email or your WhatsApp or your social media message, ask for the WhatsApp in the first section of your message, and then share the resource, because you don't want to lose the guest. They get excited that you've shared this resource and they don't actually finish reading your message and seeing that you're asking for the review. Then this one is what I think is the most important when asking for reviews, and that is sharing a direct link. So don't just ask your guest, please leave me a review, or please leave me a review on TripAdvisor or Facebook, because then your guest has to take the time to go and search for it and make sure that they're on the right platform and find where to leave the review. So rather send the direct URL, so that link through that they can just click the button and start typing their review. If you think about when you're using Uber or another ride-sharing app, or when you do delivery for your shopping that we all do with various apps, if you think about it, that request for the review pops up directly, and it makes you really easy to leave your 5-star reviews. So you're wanting to do the same for your guests by making it really easy for them to leave the review. The other thing is to make sure that you're giving options. You might be very active on Facebook, and that might be your preferred platform, but not all guests will be using Facebook. Or you might be the most active on TripAdvisor, and that's where you want your reviews, but not everyone will use that platform. So make sure that you're giving 2 or 3 options of platform, so that it's likely that one of the options that you give is at least one of them your guest will be on and be using. Then another thing that's important for you to remember for yourself is to get into the routine of asking for the reviews, because the more that you ask for, the higher percentage that you're going to get. So set yourself a specific time and set yourself reminders to do this. So whether you automate it, that whenever you receive a tour booking, it automatically goes into your calendar the day after and the month after the tour to ask this guest for a review. You can use various tools like Zapier, or depending on what CRM you're using, there's various ways to set up these reminders. But that's a very important thing to do, so that you're sticking to that routine of asking for them every single time, and not just when it's low season and you've got a lot of time on your hands. Then the next thing we're going to go into briefly is social media, and how to use social media to keep connected with your guests after the tour has happened. So a great way to do it is to mention social media during your tour. And the easiest way to do that is when you see your guests are busy taking selfies and posting to Instagram and all the various social media channels, as they are doing during the tour. That's a great and appropriate time to mention to them, hey, while you're posting, please make sure that you mention us, our social media, at XYZ Tours. So a really great time is to prompt the guest when you actually see that they are using social media. Another thing you can do is, if you're taking photos for your guests during the tour, ask for their permission if they're happy for you to share them on your social pages, and then that's another reason to tell them to come and like and follow your page after the tour, so that they can get access to all of those photos. And the reason why this is important to keep in contact after the day with your guests after the tour, and why to keep in touch, is because you'll then keep popping up on your guest social media feed, and you obviously keep front of mind, and that's fantastic for them referring to friends after the time. If you think about it, you might have been on a fantastic tour in Portugal 5 years ago, and you remember you had a great host, Claudio, but now your friend is asking about a tour in the same area, and you can't for the life of you remember what the tour company was called. So if you were following it on social media, you would be seeing posts all the time, and that would keep it front of mind. So that's what you want to do for your guests. You want to keep it front of mind. So my challenge for you today is to just get started. You can always tweak and change your strategy as you go, but get started off the bat. Prepare your first templates, so whether they're email templates or a WhatsApp or social media template that you write out on a Google Doc. Get started with those, and then you can tweak them as you go along. Set up those reminders. That's really, really important. As I say, you want to be asking for reviews after every single tour. And yeah, just get to it and get asking. I'm going to go back to those important questions we asked at the beginning of the tour, of why we're actually doing this, why we're actually looking for reviews, and why we're keeping in touch with our guests. So if we go back to those questions, The first one was, how can I create trust and loyalty with my audience without spending extra time and money on marketing? Well, this is the exact answer for you. Your customers are doing the marketing for you by posting reviews, by following and sharing your social media channel. And also just by writing a review, your customer feels more loyal with your brand. Then the next one is designing tour content and the guest want versus what they're asking for. So sometimes there might be little points along the tour and that your guests aren't 100% happy with, or that your guests would have liked to know, and they might not feel so comfortable sharing this with you face to face. So by giving them the opportunity to write a review after the tour, you're going to get more honest feedback from them. And remember, all of this feedback is good. So don't worry if occasionally reviews aren't 5-star all of the time and aren't just raving. Take into mind when reviews leave tips on things that they would have preferred to see or like to see, because that is helping you tweak your tour content for your next guests and working on keeping those reviews 5-star all the time. And then the other thing was beating competition and increasing your rankings on the distribution channels. So of course, having reviews is great for SEO, and it really helps your business stand out against other established operators. And then another one that we discussed was coming up with content for social media. While having reviews is a really great piece of content that you can share. And so that's part of creating that user-generated content, which you can actually find a link below, which you can get from the Indie blog. So those are just a few of the reasons why it's so important to be asking for reviews and doing these tasks for every tour.